Hi, I'm John Olson with Wood Magazine, and today I want to show you how to flatten a board using a hand plane. Sometimes we have a nice board that in this case is rough sawn that we'd like to use, but is just too big to run through our machinery. So instead of setting up jigs or a sled to run through a planer or cutting in pieces, running through the joiner and then gluing back together, one method you can do is simply do it by hand just using a hand plane. So I'd like to show you some of the techniques and tips as far as dealing with something that you can see is not flat at all. The first thing we need to do is somehow hold this board to the workbench. And in this case, my workbench does have bench dogs and bench dog holes drilled in it with a tail vise on this end. So when I'm locking this together, I'm just trying to keep it as still as possible so it's not moving around while I'm trying to take shavings off it. In this case, it's just a little bit too short for this spacing, so I just put a couple spacers between the bench dogs to help hold it in place. And if I push all the way down on this corner so that this end is flat, you can see it really has a huge gap on this end. So we have to support that somehow. Usually what I do is I kind of split the difference. So as I'm doing projects around the shop, the guys make fun of me because I save wedges, but it's for instances like this. So in this case, I'll put a wedge about halfway under, flex that back down, and then I'll wedge up this corner. So basically wedge your high spots first. This also gives me a really good indication of where the high spots or the twists are on this board. When I start planing it, I basically want to start with the hills and then work down to the low spots or the valleys. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be a high spot, this is going to be a high spot, and basically diagonally there's going to be a ridge all the way through. This corner and this corner, thus will be low spots. So one wedge isn't enough. There's a little bit of a gap that tapers down all the way across. So I'll just support that with wedges as well. Usually on the wedges you just want to, don't really push them in to flex the board up or down. You just want to put them in with light hand pressure just to support the board. And another one here. So usually I check to see if it's springing on me. Sometimes if you're doing a board that's convex on the top, there's going to be a concave area underneath right through the middle. This is thick enough I don't have to worry about it. If I was doing something thinner, something softer like pine, and as I'm pushing on the board I'm really noticing that the thing is flexing, then I might have to get a shim or maybe some shavings underneath just to hold the thing still. So I feel pretty good about this. Another tip with the tail vise, if you really crank down on this with a vise, you can compress the board and make it pop up in the center as well. So you just want enough pressure on there to hold that still as well without deforming your board. And now I can use a couple other tools to kind of tell me what's going on. Here I have a 4-foot aluminum straight edge. It's nothing too expensive, just a cheap one, but it gives me a really good indication that if I'm measuring across where I think my high spots are, it's pretty flat. So I don't have any dips and I don't have a hill right in the middle where it's pivoting on. If I go in this dimension, I see that I do have low spots. So this would be my high spots, and then where I have light is a low spot. So my first suspicions are turn out to be valid. As I'm doing this also, I'm going to use winding sticks. These are commercially made ones. These Lee Valley cells. And they're nice because they're actually graduated, and I really like them because they're aluminum so they don't change with seasonal swings in humidity. If I set these up and I cheat to the same side of the board, when I sight down it, I can see that it's really, really twisted. If I move this to the center so it kind of balances on the high spot, the twist isn't as bad. But if I go to where I know my high spot is, it's actually pretty flat. So this winding stick is balancing on the high spot here. This winding stick is balancing on the high spot there. So again, third time's a charm. I know that I'm going to have to basically plane this area, go to the middle, and then plane to this corner right here starting out. And then as I shave those high spots out, it'll work down to the low spots. I like to use a jack plane. It doesn't take a huge shaving at first, but what it does do is it'll cut relatively quickly. It'll give me a very nice flat surface when I get done, and I'm not going from plane to plane to plane, one set really deep, one set a little less, one set a little less, and just messing around with planes. This way I can just concentrate on what I'm doing with one plane, and like I said, it'll give you pretty good results. So starting out initially, there are kind of two ways to think about shaving on this board. I think about it as end to end and side to side. If I just go all the way down end to end, I could be scooping out the board like this, or I could be crowning it like this, because I'm going to have to take it in incremental shavings. Likewise, if I just go side to side, I could be scooping it out end to end, or I could be crowning it end to end. So as I do this, I'm going to be doing a little bit of both, just kind of trading off. Initially, back to this board, we know that it has a ridge right down here. That ridge is relatively flat, so I'm going to try to just go right down it and see what I can do. You notice initially it doesn't take big full-length shavings. It's skipping over the low spots, but I'm getting a flat surface actually pretty quickly. Now you'll notice I kind of take a diagonal shaving. If you go straight across, it really cuts through the grain really easily. You're almost taking a shear cut. And the first time I went across, you could hear little skips because I was finally getting the thing flattened side to side. Now as I'm cutting across it shears a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with going straight across. The only thing you have to watch out for if you're taking really big bites with your plane, or if you're in the right woods, if you're in like well, it's almost, you get extremes. Ring porous woods like oak, and then really soft woods like pine or cedar. If you start doing this straight across and you get to edges like this, that whole edge can kind of release and just snap right off. So you might end up with a little bit of a blowout just on your edge. If you don't want to go straight across, you can take a little bit more of a diagonal shaving. When you do this, you get a little bit more resistance. Now, as I'm doing this, you'll notice I'm just kind of working my way down. I'm taking a shaving at a time. So right now I'm working along this edge where flat board meets rough sawn board, and I'm going to try to take a full length or a full width shaving right there. This blade is 2 1/4 inches wide. So now after I take that shaving, I'm basically moving the plane over about 2 inches, taking that next shaving. And now I've gone down several times. Again, I could have been doing this, could have been doing that, just a little bit. You know, it's exaggerated when I say that. So now I'm going to go side to side again, check on my process. As I'm doing this, if I hear click and then nothing and then a click, that means I'm scooping out. If I'm going across like this and you kind of feel the plane rocking back and forth on a center point, that means you're probably crowning a little bit. And now we're to the point where I want to go back and check how my winding, or check with my winding sticks to see how the twist is in the board. I have a little bit still high corner to corner, but it's a lot better than it was. So, okay, diagonally, I'm perfectly flat. When I go lengthwise now, I'm flat till I get to about this point, and I'm starting to pick up a little bit of a gap under my straight edge, meaning this end is a little bit low. So, I've taken this little section right here a little bit too far. I need to continue to take off basically this area down to here, so right now I'm just going to leave this alone and again basically go after the high spots. Now a trick that I'm going to do, because basically I've been going diagonally the whole time. I've been going across diagonal like this and along diagonal. I'm going to start going straight down the board. So I'm going to start here, start here, here. And in all of this, you'll notice kind of how I step into the plane. I'm not just standing still and using my arms to try to muscle it through. I start, step into it, and my legs are what is providing the power to take these cuts. My arms simply hold the plane still and also steer it where I want it to go. All right, now we're gonna try to blend that corner in. You can draw on this too, just to see how things are blending. You're just gonna shave it off later anyway. So this is telling me I have a little bit there. So this is flat now, and that's a little bit of that low spot left from when I overplaned. Okay, let's see how we're doing. This is really nice. Nice and flat, so I'm basically to where I have a nice flat reference surface, but I'm not down to this corner and I'm not down to this corner. My goal now is to just keep planing this nice and flat as I go down to these spots. And this corner is going to flatten out first. This one's going to take a little bit of work. This board is this 4 feet long? No, this is about 53, 54 inches long. And I'm able to basically get the whole thing in one step. So I can start at the end, step all the way through, get it in one step. So for me, I can usually do up to about a 6-foot board with just one step and lean with your body. If you're doing a longer board, or if you're just having problems getting your feet under you or getting traction on longer boards, you can take it in sections. The propulsion again is coming from your feet. Your hands are just kind of steering. So one thing you can do is you can step in, stop halfway through, reset your feet, cut the rest. And this is really handy for really, really long stock. You can just keep working all the way down. It just takes a little bit of muscle to get that started again, but again, push with your legs. Sometimes you'll see folks, especially if they're just doing it for the first time, they don't stand behind the plane and push it. They'll almost stand in the middle and try to pull side to side, and you just don't have much for control. So if you're planing in the Western style, it really works to get behind it and just push. Now I got thinking about this as the last couple times I went down the board, is how to apply pressure to a plane as you're doing basically any cut. And you'll notice I get down to the end of the board and this hand's already off the plane and I'm flicking shavings. There's a real tendency to get this thing to cut is to almost end up crowning the board. When you start, you want to put a lot of pressure on the knob of the plane where the toe is to get it into the cut. And then in the middle of the cut, you kind of want to even out pressure. So you want to have even pressure with your hands, or as much as you can. When you get down to the end, if I keep putting pressure on that toe, the plane's just going to lift forward and I'm going to basically dive off the end. And that's where you usually have the biggest problems. You'll come flat and then it'll kind of dive off. So the way I've dealt with it is I get down to the end and this hand is almost already off. So then as I'm coming through, I can snatch a shaving and just throw it out of the way. So it's doing two things. I'm getting rid of that shaving, but I'm also not allowing myself to put any pressure at all on the toe of that plane, so I end up with a nice straight surface. You'll see, some articles and some videos where people say almost try to scoop the plane, which works. I'm to the point I don't really think about scooping the plane. I just think about pushing it straight ahead. Just a little bit left on this guy to go. Of course, the fun now is we have one little low spot. All of this is flat. So you have to keep shaving all of this off to work this high area down to where this low spot is. So I'm going to get close to it, but I'm probably not going to go all the way over. I'm probably going to work till I have a little bit of sliver in the corner, because when we get done with this, we have to flip it over, do the other side, plus we have to plane both of the edges. So in the process of doing that, I don't want to keep going on this board to the point where I make it thinner than I want to. If you look on this end, it is kind of tapered. So this is going to be my small dimension. This is my large dimension. When I flip it over on the other side, I'm going to have to shave this off first before I start getting to this. So kind of the message is, don't just keep going all the way down, because you might end up with a 1/4 inch thick board and you haven't even done the back side yet. So in this, we're trying to keep as much thickness as possible. That's usually our goal. And in this case, I think we're going to end up with a good strong 3/4, maybe 3/16. So a few shavings here and then we'll move on to the other side. Well, I think I'm to the point now I'm going to flip this thing over and work on the other side a little bit. Again, just so I end up with as much thickness as I want. I could keep planing into this corner, but if I know it, I do it, I'm going to lose another 1/16 of an inch of thickness on this board. And this is 9 5/16 inches wide. I don't need that. So when it gets down to actually using this size, I might cut this away, I might use it, I might not. Also for finishing this up, you can finish it with a smooth plane or sand it, and that might come out as well. So let's get this out of the vise, mark it for thickness, and work on the other side. We planed it like this. This was a high spot, this was a high spot. So when I flip this over to plane it, I want to flip it end for end. In this case, you can see how nicely it planed. I was planing with the grain. If I just flip it over like this, the grain is going this direction. So if I continue to plane like this, all it's going to do is tear out. So when you flip this, you want to flip it end for end. And now I know that the low spots, or the low spots on the other side are going to mirror what was initially. This corner's low, this corner's low, and you can see this corner's high, and this is high. So when gauging how thick I can get, my first inclination is that it's going to be either thinner here or here, and they look about the same, but I think that one's a little bit thinner. And I'm going to mark this with a marking gauge. Marking gauge is simply a pin or a nail or a cutter held in place on a beam, and then this is your fence. This one is really nice because it's graduated. It already has my inches marked on it. So if I want an inch board, I can just set the fence at 1 inch and mark it. In this case, I'm going to just kind of gauge what I've got. And it might be a little thicker than I thought. I can get 7/8 out of this board. Let's check the other end, because I know this is a low spot, this is a low spot. Let's check this to see, oh yeah, I can get 7/8 out of that. Then the other place to check, because on the top of the board it was convex. The bottom side is concave, so it's scooped out a little bit. Check in the middle as well, because sometimes the middle, it might be a little bit thinner than here. Here you can see a little bit of scooping out, but there, I'm good. So, mark out this edge. A little bit rough here, didn't get it marked, so I'm going to start right back here. If I mark this, I'm not going to get an accurate line. When you use your marking gauge, keep the fence pushed tight to the board, pull straight back. It's not really about putting pressure down on the pin, it's keeping that fence tight to the board, nice and straight. Flip it end for end. This side is dead straight, so I can just go straight down it. And you can see how this, I have quite a bit to remove here, but then it tapers down to absolutely nothing right in the middle of the board. So when I start planing this side, I'm not going to have to do much work until the very, very end to hit that. I'm also going to mark the ends of the board. You can see how that tapers. And you can see here I got into that rough sawn area. It was coming across straight, tipped like that, don't get an accurate line. So I need to basically cut to there and quit. To see this a little better, you can, once you have that line scratched in, you can fill it in with pencil. So simply run right down the line. Just a visual aid to help see it a little better. And now we got to look at where we're going to shave. I'm not going to shave here because it's a low spot. I have to shave here because it's a high spot. Same with this, low, high. And this appears to be my highest edge. So this tapers down to nothing. This tapers down here. Initially just starting out, I'm just going to start on this corner. Now this is a little different operation because now I have lines to actually guide what I'm doing. I can still use winding sticks, especially to judge my end product. But now I'm not going without any reference at all. I can look down and actually see what my progress is. Yep. Now what I'm doing, I'm comparing this thickness to this thickness down here, because when I get this down to the same thickness as this, then I have to start planing this and eventually connect those dots. So right now this area runs like this area runs like this, but eventually it's going to be what we had earlier where you have a strip and then it runs diagonally and runs a strip. So if you can get it the first time, it'll save you a lot of grief later on. When you've planed down to your line and you're getting nice long shavings as you go down a board, you know you've got it nice and flat. Second side done. Now that we have both sides flat, we have to worry about the edges. And in essence, we're saving the easy planing for the end, but this can be pretty frustrating too. You have to get a straight edge, just like we got a flat face, but you also have to make that edge square to the face of the board. So to do that, I'm going to hold this in place with my face vise. And this board is still short enough that I'm able to hold it in my vise without worrying about the end tipping. I have a nice big vise here, so just hold it in place. You might be able to see a little bit of the figure of this board. You can see on the end how the figure runs uphill. And the figure is usually a pretty good indicator of what the grain's going to do. Sometimes the grain runs opposite of the figure, but it's just like planing the face grain. If you start planing this and you're getting tear out and basically the wood is just tearing rather than cutting, turn the board around and work from the other side. I knew just by looking at this board is crowned, so it's got a high spot in the middle. Put my straight edge on there to verify, and sure enough, from end to end, I probably have 1/8 of an inch from the center to the ends of the board. So when I start planing on this, I'm going to start right in the middle. It's just like planing off any other hill. You start at the top, and as you plane, cutting that hill away until you create a flat surface. So at this point, I'm not as worried about, am I holding this plane perfectly square to the edge of the board, as I am in just getting a nice straight edge. Now, back this up. Now, if you remember, my blade is slightly convex. It sticks out more in the center than it does on the corners. When I hold up my square to a board, this side is high, this side is low. So all I have to do now is, instead of centering this, I'm going to cheat it over, and my blade will naturally cut the right hand side more than the left hand. The other option is to try to tip the plane, but it's hard to control that too. So as I take these shavings, right now it's not even cutting on this side, it's cutting on to my right. As I take these shavings, they get a little bigger, a little wider. Being able to flatten boards like this does take some time and a lot of work, but it's really handy to know how to do this. If you run into a situation where your lumber won't fit in a machine for size reasons, and it does take some sweat equity, but it's a great skill to know, and to do it once in a while is a lot of fun. There we go. And just like flattening a board, once you get these nice full-length shavings, you know your board is flat.